Hello and welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today's exciting session called Reinventing the Role of Data Catalog and Governance in the Era of Agents. My name is Susan Wilson. I'm the sales leader here at Alation. With experience at Pfizer and now 3 catalog vendors, I'm passionate about empowering organizations to drive business outcomes with data and AI. Data leaders today face unprecedented urgency and opportunity in this era of data and AI. Today, we'll explore how AI driven agents are transforming data catalogs and governance, making data more accessible, actionable, and critical to business success. I'm thrilled to be joined by Satyen and Greg today. I'll let them introduce themselves. So, Greg, let's start with you.
So my name is Greg Sands. I'm a venture capital investor at a firm called Costa Ventures, which I started in 2012. And I was fortunate enough that Alation was one of our very first investments. We're a seed and Series A investor and have been thrilled to partner with Satyen and the Alation team throughout their journey.
Amazing. Great to have you, Greg. Satyen.
Great to be here. I'm Satyen Sangani, and I'm the founder and CEO here at Alation, which, of course, we founded in 2012. And it has been an incredible journey, and it's been so much fun to sort of see the evolution of the company and the category and everything that people are doing in data management over that time.
Great. Amazing, Satyen. It's great to be here with you as well. Thank you both. I'm super excited for the discussion today. And here's a quick roadmap if we can advance the slides. Roadmap for today's discussion is first a chapter on the retrospective of the data catalog category. We're going to reflect on how we've arrived at this point. The second chapter is going to be the current data management crisis. Let's examine the challenges organizations are facing today. And the third chapter is going to be on reinventing the data catalog, discussing innovative approaches and modern practices. And then we'll land on the fourth chapter around agentic data intelligence, exploring how AI-driven agents are reshaping data governance and cataloging. And if we can advance to the next slide, also, if you're sharing insights from today's fireside chat on social media outlets, be sure to use hashtag data management crisis on your posts on LinkedIn or X. And also, as questions pop into your head, just enter them quickly into the Q&A box on your screen. We'll have a live Q&A at the end, and we plan to answer as many questions as possible. All right, so let's begin. Satyen, let's start with you on how we got here, and let's take a trip down memory lane. Can you walk us through the biggest challenges that you saw data teams facing 10 years ago?
It was really actually even longer ago than that. I was working at Oracle, and at the time I had run this line of business, which was basically selling financial analysis apps to financial services companies. And it would help banks do things like calculate Basel II capital calculations and determine their asset liability management and interest rate risk. And often when we implemented these applications, what we would find is that it would take literally years to just acquire the data and to get it into a format where it was usable. And a lot of the time was spent where people didn't understand or know what data that they had. And it really struck me at the time that there was just all of these knowledge management problems, like fundamentally knowledge management problems around data. Everybody wanted it. Nobody knew how to use it. And it was never clean, never high quality enough, never available enough, never accessible enough. And so, many of those things are still true, but it was even more true at the time. And I think the observation was really, hey, look, we really can solve these problems by leveraging some of the very primitive artifacts of the internet, which is really about sort of information dissemination. And so, if you think about sites like LinkedIn or more critically Wikipedia, where you have pages about people or things and you read up on them, data needed that kind of a home. And so we over time sort of had that idea of this sort of social data site, and ultimately that knowledge sharing became what was the catalog category. And a lot of people give us credit for being the category pioneers in the catalog category. And it took really this idea of metadata and data about data from being a primarily IT exercise where really, if you think about it, it's kind of this situation where, inside of an actual warehouse, you have people moving the boxes around. And that's kind of what was happening with metadata. All of the people that were doing ETL were the people that would use this stuff, but it moved it out to the lines of business. And that was really the critical observation. One, we could use the internet, and two, this data management stuff needs to be done not by IT, but by the end users of the information.
I'm actually having flashbacks as you're talking through this. Greg, can you tell us a bit about what you saw in the market 10 years ago and what prompted you to invest in Alation?
Absolutely. So I'll say one of my favorite things is talking to customers ourselves. And so when you talk to customers back in 2012 or 2013, you heard stories like one from a big bank that spent $100 million on a metadata management project. It was $3 million of software. It was $97 million of services with Accenture in order to generate a bunch of reports that then sat on desks and were never used again. And so the knowledge management problem was obvious. I was actually talking about Alation in 2013 with a tech luminary, and he said, "Oh yeah, we were working on that problem at Bell Labs in the 1970s." So the problem has been here for 60 years. Mm-hmm. But what, the insight, and again, Satyen was the catalyst for this in my brain. The insight is that it can't just be a social problem. Computers have to do the work. And Alation was invented at a time where machine learning was finally good enough that it could take information from, let's say, the SQL query stream and do basic entity disambiguation. And so that was the moment that let Alation create the category. And of course, we are at such a moment right now where machines or computers can do even more of the work for us. And that's what we're going to talk about later in the session.
Yeah. I certainly remember those times. And over the years, we've just continued to experience increased complexity, volumes of data, and increased pressures to deliver on a broad array of regulatory and business use cases, which many would actually characterize, we're in a data management crisis, which leads us to this next chapter and talking about the crisis. Satyen, how is Alation actually responding to that crisis? And how do you see AI shaping the future of data management and governance in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I think it's important to sort of define the crisis and what it is that is sort of happening in the world of data. I've done through my podcast a whole set of interviews with folks that are in and around the data ecosystem, and very recently spoke with 2 CDOs. And what's really super interesting in the world of CDOs and data teams is that in many cases they are being rapidly downsized. And for the last 10 to 12 years, with the advent of Hadoop and of course, self-service BI tools like Tableau, there was this secular investment in data where you would just always get budget. The budget would always be bigger, and people would see the CDO as this, inevitable path to the C-suite. And now companies where, we are in a moment of consideration around, SaaS writ large, but IT budgets overall, and the value that those budgets are bringing. And you compound that with the fact that we're in a high interest rate environment where subscription costs are really thoroughly analyzed and understood by most corporate financial leaders and certainly the CIOs that they work with. And you sort of have this advent of AI where everybody's saying, look, if I'm going to do something, really what I want is an efficiency moment out of the work that I'm doing. And so you have this sort of interesting perfect storm where data teams, as they were traditionally constituted, are really under a lot of pressure to deliver value. And then the question becomes, well, how do I go deliver value? How do I do that faster? How do I do that better? And the ways that we were previously doing it did work and has worked for many people. And that's certainly why Alation and many other players in the category have done well and built large businesses. But it is also the case that many teams fail and are failing. And that is where the crisis exists. And people may not want to spend as much money, or they may not be able to get to the outcomes, or may not have the expertise, or may not have the best practice knowledge. And these are fundamentally failings of really being able to do the things that matter the most to the business. And so the real question is, how do we do the things that matter the most to the business? And that baseline question, I think, is at the core of how we get out of this crisis.
Yeah. Sachin, that is so true. And Greg, taking now a broader lens and looking across the market, what are you seeing in the market now more broadly as we look at the data management crisis as well as AI?
Yeah. Well, first, data volumes have gone up not 10x, but probably 100x since the company was formed. They probably double every couple of years. Regulatory complexity has probably gone up 5x. Budgets used to go up 20% a year. Now they might be shrinking 10% a year. So all that matrix is a very challenging one. But I think Satyen is exactly right that this is the moment where we, the industry, can no more think of ourselves as enabling platforms. We need to be in the business of delivering value and business outcomes. And I think, sitting where I sit, we can see that companies that are putting AI at the center are delivering more value, they're realizing efficiency, they're actually being able to just move much faster. And it's a big transition. It's a moment where actually the CDO can potentially deliver a ton more value. So it isn't just you can do the same thing with less. No, you actually have to do more with less. The good news is that you now have the tools to do more with less.
Yeah.
Susan, what do you see? I mean, you see a lot of customers and obviously talk to them all day long, and you obviously were, doing this work, not too long ago. How are you seeing customers evolve and respond, and what's gotten better over the last 10 years and what's stayed the same?
Yeah, Satyan, what I'm seeing is, look, these challenges are actual opportunities for data leaders. And every data leader that I've spoken to has hit these make or break chapters in their career, solving some of the biggest challenges in their organization. For instance, right, the cloud modernization, we're moving things from on-premise to the cloud, to business transformations in every organization, either looking at operational efficiencies, looking at new markets. And now AI in agents is another chapter that they're seeing. Yet, I see this one from my perspective. It's not an evolution, it's an actual disruption in the way that they're talking about it, because it's literally forcing these leaders to directly now look at changing their programs to directly tie to business outcomes with these new technology enablers. And leaders that I talk to as well, they feel both fired up and freaked out at the same time. It's really quite interesting to see their range of emotion here. They see this as both promise, AI driven productivity, and also being able to drive real business impact. But you could see that concern over 50, because 50% of them say that data access and quality are still their biggest blockers in being able to unlock value. That's why I think agentic, which we're about to talk about here shortly, couldn't have hit at a better time. It's raw, it's early, but it's powerful. And it's going to help solve some of those data management, data governance challenges, and also build agents to help solving business outcomes. So I'm seeing teams actually rip apart their playbooks. They're tearing them up and writing a new one, reinventing themselves. Just as an example, we've got customers that we're speaking to, large US airline. It's actually looking at Alation to build end-to-end experiences for their customers. With these capabilities, a large oil and gas company is actually utilizing these agents on top of Snowflake and Alation in order to accelerate AI outcomes to drive operational efficiencies. An American insurer that we're working with is actually looking at leveraging the metadata to build critical data elements and stewardship agents, things that they couldn't do before. Back to your point about, the pressures of the budgets, the pressures of having access to capital, they're out now looking at ways to help make their programs more efficient. So on that point, Satyen, one of the things that I think we're also on a journey, as I think about what our data leaders, our consumers are actually going through as a reinvention, we're reinventing ourselves. And so I'd love to hear you talk about, with AI now capable of automatically tagging, classifying, governing data, will we eventually outgrow this concept of having a data catalog altogether? And is there a future where data catalogs may, I dare say, become obsolete?
It's really funny because I was at an event and somebody asked me, you've built this company, you've done this work in data management, and you've done that for 10 years, and this happened in even mid-December, and they said, what do you think the future holds? And I said, I think I've spent like the last 11 years making this thing called the catalog, and I'm going to spend probably the next 3 years making it invisible. And literally just said these words like they just came out of my mouth. I hadn't pre-planned them, hadn't truly even processed that statement. And I thought about it, and I think, if you think about sort of this idea of a knowledge base, it requires people to come to it. So you have to actually have people document stuff in Wikipedia, and you have to have people read stuff out of Wikipedia. And so in building the knowledge base, you have to do all of this work. And as Greg indicated, you can accelerate some of that through great discovery and machine learning. But fundamentally, people have to come to these catalogs and do the work of governance and do the work of discovery and do the work of tagging and classification. And a lot of the time, they just don't want to. And a lot of the time, they don't want to because fundamentally, they've got a day job and they decide they either see value out of it or they don't see value out of it. And you can make the tool the most incredible tool in the world, but it is really hard to get that going. Now, it is not impossible. It is definitely the case that we have incredible customers who are doing incredible work, and often the work of the person doing data management looks more like a marketer than it looks like somebody who knows a lot about data. But then the question becomes like, okay, well, is that the most scalable way to solve this problem? Are we as an industry going to build these tools, these governance tools, these catalogs in a way that requires people to show up and do all of this data management work so that they can then get to a business outcome? Or can we just shortcut all of this and get to a business outcome? And I think the amazing thing about agents and really AI or agentic AI, however you want to define it or classify it, is that they encapsulate all of this knowledge, which organizations would have to make these programs successful. Contextual knowledge, who knows about this stuff in the company? What is the company's current position and level of data maturity? What are the best practices and where do those things live and who knows about them? What is it that this product can and can't do? And you can take all of that context and turn data management from this procedural thing where I have to know master data management and data cataloging and metadata management and all of these things that literally no CEO cares about, but like they want it done, but they don't actually care. They just want it done, to something that is really just declarative. Like, just let me comply with GDPR. Just get me the data that allows me to build a better churn model, or better yet, build me the better churn model so I can operationalize it immediately and do all of the data quality stuff on the way to doing that and tell me what I need to do in order to be able to get there. And I think the amazing thing about this moment is we have the information, we have the technology to now design those flows so that you don't have to think about cataloging or quality. You just have to think about what the end outcome is. And that's not going to happen overnight, but I do think it's going to happen in a series of years. And I think it's going to be pretty incredible. And you're already seeing that in the technology that we all use every day, and it's going to get better and better.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. The organizations that I'm speaking to care so deeply about this, about AI agents and governance, because it's very much like also looking at your own managing your own investment portfolio, which Greg, a lot about. Just as you wouldn't place all your bets into a single stock, meaning a use case as well, enterprises are diversifying their approach, to AI. So I'm actually seeing organizations working to balance in their use cases, because a lot of this was maybe regulations based in the beginning. They're now looking at regulations, revenue growth, operational efficiency outcomes. Just as an example, just this last week, I was speaking to a leader at a major retailer who's successfully balancing both growth objectives with compliance needs. This leader is actually developing critical data products using, multiple zones, each incorporating the appropriate governance levels. These guardrails will now ensure she actually setting up AI innovation labs so that teams can work safely and responsibly, ultimately empowering the teams to operate at the speed of business. Because we just know that we can't govern everything. You're not going to govern everything in your environment. Can you just get these things right so that teams can start to work efficiently? So overall, we're witnessing just a significant shift in enterprises from that knowledge base, like you were talking about, to more action-oriented incomes by leveraging these AI agents in the environment. Great. What are you seeing with regards to enterprise adoption of AI, and how is the startup landscape actually changing as a result?
Well, so I think the startup landscape, I'll start there. The biggest change is, and I think it's a leading indicator for the enterprise environment, is that the best startups with AI at the center are growing faster than any SaaS companies ever grew, and they are doing it with fewer people than any SaaS company ever had. And it's not just that there are 3 of them, OpenAI and Anthropic, there are actually 50 of them. And so the innovation economy is showing what the enterprise can do and has to do. I think, to me, the thing that is so interesting in the conversation you guys were having before is that the data catalog can disappear, but the job to be done is still there, right? I'm a former product manager. That's how I grew up in the software industry, and so I use this sort of job to be done framework. And ultimately, the point is that agents need to do the tagging and classification and governance and assurance of data quality. That should just be done. People want data to come out the tap like a utility, right? Those are the data products that we've all been talking about. And they actually need to be more hardened than they were before, but it needs to be done with less work. And I do think that we're seeing in all of these other applications that agents can do this kind of work. They can do it quite well. And that sets us up for an environment where data products can be relied upon. And the last thing that I'll say is that one of the reasons that we need to think about data products, data where it's hardened enough that it can be relied upon and trusted, is that the prior generation of data infrastructure was built to be consumed by humans. And these data products are mainly being built to be consumed by agents and by machines. And therefore, they need to just be better.
Yeah, it really is an exciting chapter for all of us. And speaking of, we're really taking the agentic ball and running with it, Satyen. Can you share your vision behind the launch of Alation's agentic platform, and what specific challenges did you aim to solve with this new approach?
Yeah, I think that the hard thing about the space is that it requires an incredible amount of effort. And it also, in many cases, and for many use cases, and I think it also requires an incredible, even more knowledge on the behalf of the institution. They have to know what to do in the world of data management. I was speaking to a data leader of a large financial institution, and he was telling me, look, Satyen, I've got these data stewards. We try to train them literally every quarter. And we've got these critical data elements, and one of them is a credit risk score. And you and I both know what a credit risk score is. And they have to write data quality rules around these credit risk scores. And in fact, inside of Alation, it's even documented that that score needs to be between 500 and 800. So you know what the rule needs to be. But these kids don't literally even know what a score is. or whether or not what the rule needs to be, or where to write the rule. Like, do they write it on the end SCAR schema where there's actually reports analysis being done, or do they write it way upstream? And how much compute should they spend doing this stuff? Because they could do a full table scan every single hour, which would be super expensive, or they could do it periodically alongside the load, or maybe they could even do it less often because that doesn't change very often. And these are all things that the enterprise collectively knows. We know when the loads happen. We know the lineage of these data sets. We know that the credit risk score is something that's commonly known to literally every single bank. And yet, what the current software requires you to do is to go into a system like Alation and literally write a rule that says credit risk score for this table needs to be between this number and should be checked this often. And so you have all of this stuff to do that would require you to have knowledge of the system, knowledge of the domain, knowledge of what best practice happens to be, knowledge of the compute environment within that institution, knowledge of best practice around where to actually test these things and how often they fail. Like, who knows these things? Nobody knows these things. They're just, it's too much complexity to have to navigate. But the amazing thing about these agents is we could know all of those things, and we do. And so we could literally tell somebody, and that's literally one of the exciting things about what we're building is, where should you build this rule? How should you build this rule? What level of testing is required? And we can learn and we can iterate. And so the ability for us to be able to get people through the work of data management to an end outcome that really matters is really critical. And I'm super excited because I think that's where these agents can take all of this sort of ambient knowledge and turn it into something that is super actionable and super usable very quickly.
The other thing that I think is just interesting to note here, Satyen described the person who is capable of doing that level of work today. Someone with all of that contextual knowledge and all of those skills is an incredibly valuable human being who could, his or herself, be out driving business value and is instead sitting there mucking around in the bowels of the database. And so literally freeing up all of that talent, all of that labor in order to go drive business value is part of what we all need to do.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing more cringeworthy when you're thinking about who you want to be part of your data team. You really want the subject matter experts, and Greg, and you don't want to ask them to do things that net, we should be able to serve up to them. Which Satyen, I think you helped to answer Greg Scott's question here about, how agentic AI, could help manage these critical data elements.
Yeah, I think it's really all about process coordination, acceleration, and context. And so, you can now build agents that allow you to tell the system what you want to try to do. Like, I want to improve the quality of my customer data. Well, okay, that's a pretty vague statement. Why do you want to do that? Well, we have this report, and actually this report is in the financial domain, and I can't actually figure out per customer profitability. Okay, well, you're not really improving every single element within your customer data. You're improving the average revenue for that customer, the average number of activities for that customer. There are some data elements then that correspond to that key problem statement, and you don't need to boil the ocean. You don't need to go get every single column in a 3,000 column table perfectly clean and perfectly met. You just need to do the work that is related to the outcome that you're trying to drive. And that, I think, is what's so exciting, is that you can train the agents to really help you break down the problem that you're trying to solve, starting from the outcome, and then you can work backwards to deciding what of this metadata needs better definitions, which of this metadata needs to be deduped and mastered, this data needs to be deduped and mastered. Like, we can tell you what tools you need to bring to bear, as opposed to you having to say, wait a second, I've got to go buy this tool and that tool and that tool and that tool and learn it, and then figure out exactly what level of scope, and I've got to go interview 47 stakeholders, and then I can implement the stuff. It's like so hard to do, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, I agree. What does the Alation AI Agentic SDK play in helping organizations build custom AI applications, with the trusted and governed data, to solve on those business outcomes? And how will it differ from other available tools?
Yeah. So we have built what we called an agentic AI platform. It's one of the 3 announcements that we made at the beginning of the month. And what that platform is starting with is basically revealing Alation as an MCP server. MCP is a standard that was developed by Anthropic, one of the big foundational model makers. And essentially what it does is think about it if you know what RAG is, but even if you don't, it basically allows you to take these foundation models and provide it with context that the application has. Specifically, what are the APIs and services that application can do? What are the bits of knowledge that application can hydrate the model with in order to be able to get better accuracy and higher fidelity? And if you think about this idea of MCP, if a whole bunch of applications can reveal themselves to the model that are using them, you can then do really sophisticated and coordinated flows. So we saw MCP. It obviously was released late last year. We were super excited to be, one of I think we're the very first vendor, frankly, that I've seen in the broader data space and certainly in the metadata space. And frankly, beat OpenAI, who announced MCP support today, to the punch because it is such an incredible standard. That is the first step. But the basic idea behind it is now leveraging MCP, I can go build agents. I can use the metadata inside of Alation. I can use the services inside of Alation, and I can say, hey, I want to go take this data quality, definition or this data definition, and I want to publish it into somebody's email, and I want them to review it every quarter. Now that might, or every year, right? And that might be a regulatory action that you want to take. That's a pretty simple thing to go do. But MCP allows you to basically arbitrarily build these agents so you can go do these things and do them faster and do them with English. And so really exciting. And I think we're at the very tip of the spear and have early adopter customers that are doing some pretty fun and innovative things. But that was really the inspiration. Let customers do what they need to do in order to coordinate the actions they need to coordinate using English and these amazing foundation models.
Well, that's great. Greg, you've also seen some other transformative plays, and what lessons have you learned in them?
The number one lesson is one of the things that I'm so excited to see with Alation here is speed, just velocity of innovation. And so again, Satyen's comment that not only were we the first MCP server to ship, to embrace this new standard and use it to deliver value, but announcing these 3 new products and actually delivering them into customers' hands. So that I think is number one. I think the second is that this kind of innovation comes from talking to customers, right? You have to listen, but it is hard to synthesize and decide exactly what are the couple of things that you're really going to do and really going to deliver. And then the final thing that, again, Alation has really demonstrated itself to do over time is you got to finish the job. Yeah. So remember, for example, Alation was born in the on-prem era and actually has made the cloud transition. There are many companies that actually haven't successfully made the cloud transition, but Alation launched off on that journey, delivered against it. And, so being able to combine the innovation and speed with the ability to deliver and sustain the effort that requires is ultimately what leads to long-term success, not just for Alation, but for customers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that that's just so key. Having been here for about 5 months, I literally see that with working with our customers is the ability for us to be thinking ahead and bringing them along in this journey and solving those business outcomes and, truly delivering innovation that will let them do that. Speaking of, I'm sure that some of the folks on the webinar today saw the product announcements, but for folks that didn't, Satyen, can you walk us through those announcements, very briefly? And we've got some slides that we're going to be bringing up here. And just as we're bringing up those slides, I want to encourage people to go ahead and submit your questions. We're about to open it up to live Q&A, so feel free to type in those questions as you think about them.
Sure. And as we pull up those slides, I'll sort of walk through a view of the world, which I think is really the most important means through which to conceptualize these announcements. I think as we think about data management, we've talked about things that are in the data intelligence stack. Alation has historically described itself as a data intelligence vendor. And in doing so, we do things like search and discovery and data cataloging and data governance. And we just announced a data quality solution integrated into the stack that extends what we do and also is one that allows us to partner in an open way with other vendors. That's been the front and center of what people think about. I think what was really exciting about this launch is that we basically realized, wait a second, actually the real thing that people are going to be interacting with is these agents. They're not going to, when I say we make data cataloging invisible, I don't mean these things go away. I just mean that they're not front and center. We don't need to think about adoption as much as we used to. We used to need to think about it because that was the best technology that we could take advantage of. But today, what we're going to be increasingly interacting with is these agents. And so we basically made 3 announcements. The first of them is that we announced our agentic platform with the launch of MCP, and there's much more to come there, which is super exciting. If you go to the next slide, the second thing that we announced was a data product marketplace. And what it does is it separates the problem of cataloging your data from the problem of discovering your data and publishing the best gold standard data sets for people to be able to discover. And so in this data product marketplace, you have the ability to leverage AI in order to be able to answer fundamental business questions. And it would reveal to you those data products that can answer those questions. But to the point that Greg made, not only do these data products support better data management, more reusable data, which is really what data teams, if you're not actually building an insight, you better be building reusability. I mean, those are really the 2 things that data teams do. And what we're going to be able to do is leverage those data products for AI. And so then, if you think about it, alongside the agentic announcement, you now have the ability to have AI directly talk to data products. And so these are coordinated and critically interlinked launches because now you have this ability to be able to publish things that are gold standard or up to a reasonable standard that AI can now understand and fundamentally read. If we move to the next slide, the third announcement that we made was one where, and I think I spoke about many of these use cases, the credit risk use case being a perfect example, but that we basically announced a data quality solution that allows you to measure what matters. You can basically take the best knowledge of the semantics of your organization, of the context of your organization, of the lineage and the pipelines of your organization, and you can build data quality rules that are simple and impactful and that leverage the best of that knowledge to be able to have you spend the least amount of time to get the most amount of value out of the quality work that you do. You can spend an infinite amount of time on data quality. Our job is to make sure you don't. And what we're excited about is that this is one of the first agentic apps that we will build that will take all that institutional knowledge and plug it right in front of you. So super exciting. And those are the 3 announcements we've made. What I'm even more excited about was that, as Greg mentioned, we actually have 2 other new products that we have coming that are in store, and they're going to be even more powerful and even more oriented around end use. And so this is, we've probably launched roughly 3 products. I probably am underestimating it over the first 12 years because the catalog was the thing that that was all the gravity. That was where we were putting all of our effort and all of our innovation. And now what we can realize is that that doesn't have to be the mode of interaction for data management. It can change. And these are 3 examples of how it will change.
Oh, that's great, Satyen. We have been getting a few questions here. I just want to clarify for those in the audience. This is available in the cloud instance.
That's absolutely right. If you think about the development velocity and the reason to go to cloud, there's many of them. You can guarantee a level of service. You don't have to have your customers be experts at managing servers and managing compute and distributing workloads. You can guarantee a certain level of capability, but you also can move a lot faster. Yeah. And one of the great things about our ability to be in the cloud and to build these apps in the cloud is that because we've kept the architecture simple, we can move with a lot of speed and we can be at the front end of the bleeding edge of innovation.
Okay. Yeah. Makes sense. We're about to get into the Q&A. Satyen, Greg, just as I think about what we just talked about, it is just so exciting to be in this era of AI and agentic. We're just going to see a whole new ecosystem positioned to solve, new sets of business problems, outcomes, opportunities. And we're going to go from, creating these knowledge bases to actually action-oriented outcomes with a line of business. And so the AI Agentic SDK is really something I'm super excited about, because I just see it as a former data leader myself, the ability to quickly accelerate the teams, business teams, data teams, technology process teams, to really find the trusted data and get the right level of governance and service to these agents. And so it's really, really something I'm super excited about. All right. We've got one first question here. Can you comment on, and Satyen and Greg, this one is for you. Can you comment on the importance of an open architecture to support the enterprise journey to agentic era? How important is choice and flexibility, as it seems like this industry is moving so fast?
Yeah, look, having watched the industry over, I hate to say it, 35 or 40 years, if customers are going to get great value out of things, they have to operate in an open architecture where they can partly develop some things on their own capabilities. You want to be an enabler of allowing them to do that, and to pull in and plug in best of breed products in new categories that emerge. And so you see in this data environment, many of the big vendors are trying to use that data gravity to keep everything in a Databricks silo or in a Snowflake silo or the like. And I think customers recognize that, look, those are great vendors and they do extraordinary work, but being able to operate in an open framework where you can plug in third-party products and you can develop on your own is essential to drive the business value that you want.
Yeah. Makes a ton of sense. I'm just seeing just as, we used to be thinking about things as source systems. I'm also thinking about, partnerships with business applications in so much more ways as a result of what we're building out here. Another question with respect to, when will these capabilities be available to customers?
We expect that the betas will be available to the customers that are in those programs in a matter of weeks. And we are expecting to launch, and they'll be different for different versions of the releases, but we're expecting to launch most of the products by the end of Q2, and probably earlier, but certainly within the Q2 quarter, which for us, we operate on a fiscal quarter where Q2 ends in July. And so it'll be that fiscal Q2 for us.
Great stuff. Here's another one. Agentic DQ. Does that mean I can delegate the responsibility for data quality out to the data owners and stewards in the business? It seems like we're looking at, how can I delegate off of my team's plate, which is a great question.
Absolutely. We expect that's exactly the case. Like, you should be able to assign a domain owner who's a steward, who understands that particular data and the business logic around that data, and that person ought to be able to do the work of data quality. Now, there are certainly, this is going to be an application that will evolve and will change over time, but it is absolutely the case that we expect this to be something that a relatively non-technical user can use. You have to know something about data, but probably day one, not an extraordinary amount. And certainly, you don't need to be a data engineer.
Yeah, I really love it. Natural language processing, being able to access even more people with that domain knowledge versus having to code it or pass it along to somebody to code. That's really quite exciting. I see some questions about wanting to learn more about the data quality product. We plan on posting some additional information about the data quality product and more deep dives on that here shortly. So we'll be getting to those. Why don't we go ahead and wrap it up? Closing comments. Let's start with you, Satyen, and then we'll go to you, Greg.
It's funny. I think that as a founder, it's been a really fun journey to be able to sort of see the work that we've done over the last 5 years, but then realize 10 years and realize, wait a second, we now have a set of tools that allows us to solve these problems in a way that are literally 10, maybe 100x better than we ever have. And so it does mean a lot of navigation, because you have to think about, okay, well, there's lots of people who are doing things under the old paradigm, and yet we also have to build to the future. And that exercise of bringing the learnings that we have, the knowledge that we have into the future is what has been incredible for me. And the speed with which many of these products, frankly, the engineering products and the coding products allow you to build and learn is just incredible. So it's a moment of maximal change. It feels like every day is accelerating and we're moving faster. But gosh, if you're a builder, this is a really fun moment.
It is. It is. Greg, how about you?
I'll end with what I'll call a call to arms, which is that the chief data officer and the data organization has an opportunity to add 3, 4, 5x more value than it was adding a few years ago. And the tools available to do this work have gotten so much better and so much more powerful. You see it and hear it even in the public press about vibe coding and all these non-technical users who can write code because you're operating at higher levels of abstraction. And that is exactly what we're doing here, is working at a higher level of abstraction so that people with less technical skill but still domain knowledge can do the really important work. And so then you combine that with we're in this era of large language models that are so powerful, and they take, I'll pause for a second. Our entire industry of enterprise software is built on SQL and then NoSQL databases that are rows and columns of numbers. And numbers are really the only first-class citizen. And that's what we've principally been talking about. But the data organization now gets to incorporate large language models. They're the logical people to go make that work. That includes words as first-class citizens, natural language processing, and pictures, and ability to weave those together. But the data needs to be a utility. It needs to be quality, it needs to be trusted, and it has to happen with little or no work for humans so that it can be consumed by machines. And I think that is the opportunity for the data organization and the chief data officer to lean into in this moment, and the kind of aspiration that we should all have for our section of the industry.
You couldn't have said it better, Greg. I mean, you just took the words out of my mouth. I've been in this space for quite some time myself, and it really is a moment for data leaders to seize it. Seize this moment. This is a new, exciting chapter. And don't be disrupted by somebody else who might take this ball. Run with the ball. Run with this in your organization. And it's an exciting moment to deliver on business outcomes, to write a new chapter for your organization. So we would love to keep this conversation going. Number one is, if you're on social, LinkedIn or X, use hashtag data management crisis to keep that conversation going. Also, feel free to reach out to us. We are super excited to hear from all of you about these use cases and about how we in turn can help you deliver on your business outcomes leveraging Alation. And we're really excited about this. And so thanks so much for being part of this movement, and let's go build this future together. Thank you all.